Floating on the surface of a crystal-clear lake, Aquazoo promised unforgettable encounters with rare aquatic creatures. But when tanks begin exploding from the inside with no trace of an intruder, whispers of a freshwater Kraken spread like wildfire. How does a monster attack without being seen? And why does the therapy dolphin seem to know what no one else dares to say? The air was humid over Crystal Glen Lake as the Mystery Incorporated gang drove up a winding path, their van's tires crackling over the gravel. Below, shimmering in the morning sun, floated Aquazoo, an architectural marvel nestled on a series of steel pontoons. The floating zoo promised full immersion in aquatic environments, complete with submerged glass tunnels and futuristic domes that dipped beneath the lake's surface. But the call they received the night before made it clear. Something was going terribly wrong. Inside the van, Fred studied a brochure. It says here the tanks are reinforced with carbon-plated glass. Whatever's smashing them, it's not an accident. Yeah, especially if it's a Kraken, man. Shaggy trembled, clutching his snack bag like a security blanket. I don't do well with tentacles. Scooby nodded emphatically. Rua. Rua. As the gang arrived, they were met by Marina Blake, the head marine biologist. Young, brilliant, and visibly exhausted, she led them down a steel gangway that connected the docks to the main dome, suspended partially underwater. We've had 3 attacks in 5 nights, she said grimly. Each one worse than the last. Last night, one of our tropical fish tanks shattered. The glass wasn't broken, it looked like it imploded. Velma adjusted her glasses. Any footage? Marina shook her head. That's the strange part. All security feeds go static minutes before each attack. No signs of tampering, no power failure. Just silence. Then chaos. As they entered the main dome, the team was greeted by a dazzling view. Beneath them, visitors walked through underwater corridors where stingrays floated like ghosts. Gigantic tanks loomed on either side, filled with schools of fish, bioluminescent jellyfish, and even a small pod of dolphins. One in particular caught Scooby's attention. Rook, Raggy. A dolphin. The dolphin swam directly up to the glass where Scooby stood, emitting a playful series of clicks. Its gaze, however, was strangely human. It didn't just look at Scooby, it noticed him. That's Luno, Marina smiled. Our therapy dolphin. He's trained to work with kids with trauma. Very intelligent. But lately, he's been acting strange. That evening, the group split up to investigate. Fred and Daphne explored the command center, reviewing security protocols. Velma delved into maintenance logs and technical blueprints, searching for structural anomalies. Meanwhile, Shaggy and Scooby, of course, wandered into the cafeteria, and then promptly fell asleep near the dolphin observation dome, bellies full of shrimp canapes. A shrill alarm shattered the calm. They woke to red lights and water cascading into the visitor tunnel below. Marina's voice echoed over the PA, Zone 3 breach. Repeat, Zone 3 breach. Fred raced to the central panel. That's the Amazon habitat, sealed off from visitor access. How could it be breached? The footage, again, was corrupted, just static. Velma arrived, panting, holding a shard of glass in one hand. This isn't a clean break. It's as if something crushed it from the inside, like a vacuum implosion. Ruro, Scooby whispered, pointing toward a small service tunnel. From the open hatch, a trail of dripping water led out of the containment zone. And lying just beside it, half tucked into the darkness, was a shimmering blue scale, large as a coin and glowing with iridescent sheen. Velma knelt beside it, her brow furrowing. No creature in this zoo has scales like this. Fred turned slowly toward the lake. Then whatever left this behind, isn't supposed to be here. The next morning came cloaked in heavy mist, shrouding Aquazoo like a veil of secrecy. Waves lapped softly against the floating structure, but there was an eerie stillness in the air. It felt watched. Inside the control dome, Velma stood at the main computer, analyzing the scale found the night before. Her fingers darted across the keyboard while Fred paced behind her. "Any results?" he asked. "I ran the scale through every marine species database I could access," she muttered, frustration growing. "Nothing matches. It's not fish, not reptilian, not even known cephalopods. It's like it doesn't exist." Daphne entered carrying 2 mugs of strong coffee. "Maybe it's something that's not supposed to exist." Meanwhile, in the dolphin enclosure, Scooby and Shaggy had returned, drawn by the presence of Luno. The dolphin seemed agitated, swimming in erratic loops. It chirped frantically whenever Scooby approached, nudging the glass, tapping it with its nose, as if trying to communicate. "Like, I think he's trying to tell us something, Scoob." "Rhea. Resage." Shaggy leaned closer. "What is it, boy?" "Trouble at sea." Suddenly, Luno stopped swimming and stared directly at them. His sleek body slowly twisted to show a series of small, reddish marks near his dorsal fin, suction marks, arranged in a perfect circle. "Zoinks!" Shaggy gasped. "Those look like tentacle marks." The gang regrouped in the maintenance deck, beneath the main dome, where low lighting flickered against exposed pipes and hissing valves. Marina joined them, visibly shaken. She examined Luno's injury and grew pale. "This confirms it," she said quietly. "Luno must have encountered it during the last breach. He's never behaved like this. And these suction marks, nothing in our tanks could do this." Fred took a breath. "If this thing can enter the enclosures without damaging the outside and only leaves faint biological traces behind, then we're dealing with something smarter than a typical animal." Velma nodded. "It must be using the internal water circulation systems. These pipes run throughout the complex, connecting tanks for filtration and oxygenation. But the main valves are sealed off with pressure locks," Daphne added. "No human, or animal, could move through them without being crushed." Fred narrowed his eyes. "Unless someone wants this to happen." As they considered the implications, a loud metallic clang echoed from somewhere below. The group turned in unison. "That came from the old research wing," Marina whispered. "We decommissioned it months ago after a funding cut." With flashlights in hand, the gang descended into the underlevels, rusted, wet corridors that hadn't seen visitors in months. The air was damp and laced with salt and old metal. Water dripped steadily from the pipes above, punctuating each step with quiet tension. They reached the sealed door to the research wing. The lock had been broken, forced open from the inside. Inside the abandoned lab, dust danced in the light beams as they swept across forgotten monitors and overturned filing cabinets. But what caught their attention was a large cylindrical tank at the center of the room, cracked at the base, leaking a slow stream of brackish water. "What was kept in there?" Fred asked. Marina's voice trembled. "That was part of our failed cross-species adaptation program. We were testing freshwater adaptation in exotic marine life. But the final specimen, the most aggressive, was transferred off-site months ago, or so I thought." Velma examined the cracked tank. "This wasn't broken by accident. This thing escaped." Suddenly, a low, echoing growl reverberated through the pipes. Everyone froze. It came again, deeper this time, vibrating the floor beneath their feet. "Ruro," Scooby whispered, ears flattened. The team bolted out of the lab just as a pipe overhead exploded, spewing cold water and fragments of metal. Something slithered inside, just for a second. Long dark. Tentacled. Fred grabbed Marina's arm. "Seal this level. Now." They reached the emergency hatch and slammed it shut just as another tremor rattled the corridor. Behind the thick steel, something scraped. When they returned to the surface, the mist had thickened. But the worst had yet to come. Luno was gone. The dolphin's enclosure was open, the water still rippling. A small trail of wet suction marks led from the edge of the tank, to the filtration chamber. The filtration chamber loomed like the bowels of a steel leviathan, with steam rising in columns from every crevice. Scooby and Shaggy clung to each other as the gang stood at the rim of the open access hatch, staring into the churning water below. "We have to go in after him," Fred said, determination in his voice. Shaggy turned pale. "Like, go into the giant monster water pipe where Luno and a slimy megasquid just disappeared?" "Rua!" Scooby barked, taking a nervous step back. Velma adjusted her glasses. "We don't have a choice. If that creature can travel through the system, it might reach the animal nursery next. We need to track it, and Luno, before it's too late." Marina nodded solemnly. "There's a maintenance raft we can use. It follows the old inspection routes under the surface. It's slow, but it might get us close." Soon, the gang boarded a small, flat vessel no larger than a golf cart. Its motor hummed low as it glided into the dark artery of the pipe system. Overhead, narrow lights flickered like dying fireflies, casting twitching shadows across the corrugated walls. The deeper they went, the more the tunnels felt like a forgotten world. Slime clung to the walls. Strange claw marks scarred the steel. And every so often, the soft plip of water echoed behind them, always behind them. Daphne peered over the edge. "The water's cold. Too cold. Like it's been coming from somewhere, unnatural." Marina brought up a map on her tablet. "This section wasn't built for public use. It was added during our original expansion plans, connects to isolated tanks that were never open to the public. One of them is the experimental freshwater predator dome." Fred's brow furrowed. "That's not listed on the zoo brochure." "Because it was shut down after an accident," Marina admitted. "There were rumors. But no proof." Just then, the raft jolted as something brushed underneath it. Shaggy screamed. "It touched us. It touched us." Velma checked the sonar scanner. "There's something large, maybe 30 feet away. It's not stationary." Fred gripped the rail. "Keep moving. We're close." Suddenly, a new sound emerged. Faint. Clicking. Then, chirping. Scooby's ears perked up. "Listen," he barked. It was Luno. The raft followed the sound through a narrowing tunnel until it opened into a large, flooded chamber. There, amidst faint bioluminescent lights and a broken filtration fan, floated Luno. Trapped behind a partially collapsed gate. Shaggy pointed. "Like, it's him. And he's okay." But before they could cheer, the sonar spiked. A shadow shifted behind the dolphin, enormous and deliberate. Tentacles swirled in the murky depths, almost hypnotic in their motion. Fred reacted fast. "Daphne, activate the gate controls. We need to free Luno." Daphne scrambled to the nearby control panel, fingers dancing over rusted buttons. Sparks flew. The gate creaked and shuddered, but wouldn't budge. "It's jammed," she cried. "It's not responding." Velma examined the panel. "It's being overridden, remotely. Someone doesn't want us opening it." Scooby whimpered. "Our remote?" Marina's expression hardened. "Then someone is controlling the creature. It's not just instinct, it's being directed." Luno began to thrash, sending up waves as the creature moved closer. Its tentacles wrapped around a steel beam with casual strength, bending it as if it were paper. Fred made a decision. "We're getting in there." He grabbed a manual crank from the emergency hatch and rushed toward the access wheel. The others covered him, watching the water as the shadow inched closer. Suddenly, something surfaced. Not the creature, but a camera drone. It hovered above the water, its red light blinking silently before zooming away. Fred froze. Someone's watching us. Velma narrowed her eyes. And broadcasting it. The gate finally screeched open. Luno darted forward, chirping wildly, bumping into Scooby as if to thank him. Then, the water surged. The creature rose, only partially, revealing a mask. Not a face. A dark, reinforced mask attached to a collar-like harness. Pipes extended from it, pumping something thick and green. Daphne gasped. It's not a kraken. It's a genetically altered animal. Velma's voice was grim. No. It's a controlled animal. They all turned as the drone reappeared, this time projecting a distorted voice through its speaker. You're getting too close, Mystery Incorporated, turn back now, or the next habitat falls. Then, with a high-pitched whir, the drone vanished into the shadows. Fred turned to the others. We've just confirmed two things, the monster is real, and someone is pulling its strings. The raft creaked as it docked at an old maintenance platform deep beneath the zoo's filtration complex. The walls were lined with corroded pipes and moss-covered signs, barely legible under flickering emergency lights. Fred held the flashlight steady as the gang stepped onto the steel floor, boots echoing in the hollow silence. Velma tapped at her scanner. The power fluctuations came from here. This facility was disconnected from the main grid years ago. Marina wiped grime from an old plaque. Section B, Research Annex, Experimental Bioaquatics Division. This wasn't in any blueprints I've seen. Daphne's voice was tense. So, what exactly were they experimenting on? Fred led the way down a narrow hallway where rusted tanks lined the walls, each labeled with strange codes, A1, PH, C3, AR, D7, CEP. One tank had shattered long ago, its metal ribs bent outward, as if something had escaped violently. Scooby sniffed near one of the tanks and whimpered. Ruro, bad plarse. Shaggy nodded. Like, this is where horror movies go to retire. They entered a large observation room. Inside, dusty monitors buzzed to life as Velma restored minimal power. Grainy footage played, a dolphin, heavily sedated, being injected with a glowing serum. A technician in a hazmat suit spoke in coded jargon. Subject 7, Freshwater cephalopod hybridization, neural implant test complete. Host exhibiting behavioral compliance. Transmitting controls to remote station. Velma's jaw dropped. They weren't just experimenting on animals, they were weaponizing them. Fred clenched his fists. And whoever's behind this never shut the program down. Daphne studied a terminal. Look, here's a list of all zoo staff who had access to this lab. Marina stepped forward, her face pale. My uncle. Dr. Ivan Kale, he's on this list. He disappeared 2 years ago after being fired for unauthorized modifications to the habitat designs. Shaggy blinked. Wait, like. You didn't think to mention the mad scientist uncle sooner? He wasn't mad. Marina protested. He cared about the animals more than anyone. But after his funding was cut, he got paranoid. He said the board was hiding something. Scooby shivered. Rue said. The Kraken is real. The room darkened as a loud klaxon echoed through the pipes. Red lights flashed. Velma pulled up a live feed from the zoo's internal network. The nursery tank was in chaos. The feed showed splintered glass, overturned enrichment devices, and terrified staff evacuating children and baby animals. The water churned violently, and in the center, the masked creature surged upward in a violent breach, striking a viewing tunnel and causing cracks to spiderweb across the glass. Fred grabbed his radio. Base, evacuate all sectors near the nursery. Seal off water lines and secure the mammals. But the reply was garbled. Only static came through. Daphne's eyes widened. They're jamming communications. Scooby howled. Luno. Velma pointed to a blinking signal on the map. There's a sub-access tunnel leading directly to the nursery from this lab. It was probably used for specimen transfers. Fred took command. Then we use it. We can beat the creature there and set a trap. As they prepared to move, a shadow passed in the hallway. Fred drew his flashlight, sweeping it quickly, but nothing was there. Did anyone else? He started. Marina stepped back. We're not alone down here. They moved swiftly through the crumbling tunnels, with Luno swimming beside the main water pipe, chirping softly, almost like a warning. The air grew colder, the water thicker with sediment, and the scent of antiseptic lingered like a ghost. Halfway through the tunnel, they encountered a sealed bulkhead. It's been welded shut, Velma noted. Recently. Shaggy groaned. So, the bad guy knew we'd come this way. Daphne stepped forward. Wait. This wall isn't steel. It's composite plastic, easier to melt. She sprayed solvent from a toolkit and used a heat rod to cut a hole big enough for the gang to crawl through. On the other side was a holding room, and inside it, a control chair surrounded by old monitors and one still-active terminal, displaying a blinking interface labeled, Hydra Protocol, engaged. Fred scrolled through the system logs. This is it. Whoever's behind this has been controlling the creature from here. Velma began decoding the command logs. Each attack was triggered remotely. But the pattern isn't random, it's staged. Testing limits. Seeing how the zoo responds. Marina's face fell. Someone is treating this like a military drill. Then, a chilling noise filled the chamber, a distorted voice through the intercom. You shouldn't have come this far. The zoo was never meant for guests like you. It was unmistakably Dr. Kale. You were warned. Now you'll witness what happens when they ignore the future. Suddenly, a loud boom echoed from above. The wall-mounted map blinked, the main tank's outer gate had been breached. Fred's face hardened. He's releasing the Kraken, into the open lake. The heavy metal doors groaned as Fred slammed the emergency lock controls, desperately trying to seal off the open lake from the zoo's submerged habitats. But the mechanisms were slow, sluggish from years of neglect, and behind him, the water pressure surged violently, thrashing the reinforced glass walls. Come on. Come on. Fred barked, pulling levers and pressing buttons as the others scrambled to safety. Scooby and Shaggy clung to each other, their faces pale under the dim emergency lights. This is way worse than any haunted house, man, Shaggy whispered. We need to evacuate the marine mammals now. Velma shouted, her fingers flying over the portable console. If that creature gets inside, it'll destroy everything, and no one will be safe. Marina stayed close, stroking Luno's slick back as the therapy dolphin emitted calming clicks and whistles. But even Luno's usual serenity was shaken, his eyes darting nervously toward the churning water. From the murky depths, a colossal shape emerged, breaking the surface with a thunderous splash that sent waves crashing into the viewing platforms. The creature was unlike anything the gang had ever seen, tentacles thick as tree trunks, mottled skin glistening with a strange, bioluminescent sheen. Its enormous eyes glowed with an eerie intelligence. That's no ordinary Kraken, Daphne murmured, eyes wide with both awe and terror. It's something, engineered. Fred nodded grimly. Kale's final experiment. Suddenly, the creature roared, a deep, guttural sound that vibrated through the water and into their bones. The force shattered part of the glass wall, sending shards flying and flooding the corridor with icy water. Get back! Fred yelled, grabbing Scooby and pulling him away from the broken glass. They retreated into a narrow maintenance corridor, the water rising fast. Velma activated her waterproof tablet to relay information. Kale's neural implants must be controlling it remotely, but how? Marina shuddered. If he can control the Kraken, he could attack anywhere, even beyond the zoo. Scooby whimpered as a distant rumble shook the structure. Ruro, more trouble. As alarms blared and sprinklers sprayed a fine mist, Fred's radio crackled faintly. This is base control, evacuation order in effect. All personnel evacuate immediately. Daphne glanced out a shattered window and saw zoo staff and visitors hurrying toward the exits, panic etched on every face. We need to find Kale, and stop him before this gets worse. Velma pulled up Kale's last known location from the zoo's internal GPS. He's at the old control tower near the main gate, the only place with a signal strong enough to operate those implants. The gang sprinted through flooded corridors, water up to their knees. Luno swam alongside, her clicks piercing the chaos. Suddenly, Scooby stopped, ears twitching. Rue. What is it, boy? Ahead, flickering lights revealed a figure silhouetted against a wall of monitors, the unmistakable form of Dr. Ivan Kale. His eyes gleamed with madness and desperation. You're too late, Kale sneered, voice cold and controlled. The world must pay for what it's done to nature. Fred stepped forward. Kale, this isn't justice. It's destruction. Kale laughed bitterly. Justice? No. This is evolution. The old ways are dead. The Kraken will tear down your cities, your technology, and your lies. He slammed a fist on a console, sending a surge through the control systems. The Kraken's roar echoed through the water, this time closer, more furious. Velma quickly hacked into the system, fingers trembling. I can override his control signals, but I need time. Scooby barked encouragement, and Shaggy whispered nervously, like, you got this, Velma. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the entire complex began to shake violently. Structural failure, a voice crackled over the radio. Evacuate now. Kale's eyes narrowed. You won't stop me. The Kraken will rise, and with it, a new order. As the walls trembled and water surged, the gang prepared for the final confrontation, knowing that the fate of the zoo, and perhaps the world, hung in the balance. The water surged relentlessly, flooding the control tower as Velma's fingers danced over the keyboard. The tension was suffocating, each second a battle against time and rising tides. Around her, the gang was battered but determined. Fred's face was set, eyes sharp as he coordinated their defense. Daphne's voice was steady, though her heart raced. Shaggy and Scooby clung to each other, trying to stay brave despite the chaos. Marina stayed close to Luno, the therapy dolphin whose clicks now seemed to echo a desperate hope. We need to cut Kale's link to the Kraken, Velma said, eyes fixed on the flashing codes and failing systems. If I can isolate the neural interface, I can sever his control. Kale, frantic and wild-eyed, slammed his fists against the console, desperate to override her attempts. You can't stop evolution. The Kraken is unstoppable. Fred stepped forward, voice firm but calm. Kale, listen to yourself. This isn't evolution. This is destruction born from pain and hatred. There's still a way back. Kale's laugh was hollow, but beneath it, a flicker of doubt flashed. The world abandoned me, left me alone with this power. I won't let it win. Velma's fingers flew faster, lines of code scrolling like a torrent. Suddenly, a surge of energy crackled, then, silence. The Kraken's violent thrashing slowed, the massive tentacles ceasing their furious assault. Luno emitted a high-pitched whistle, swimming closer to the surface with a graceful leap. The water calmed, ripples smoothing over the glass walls. Kale sank into his chair, exhaustion and defeat washing over him. What have I done? Fred approached cautiously, extending a hand. You created something incredible, Kale. But power without control leads to chaos. Help us make it right. As emergency crews flooded the zoo, evacuating visitors and staff, the gang helped stabilize the habitats. The Kraken, now docile, was secured with tranquilizers and transported for study, no longer a weapon, but a reminder of nature's raw, unpredictable power. Marina knelt beside Luno, whispering, "Thank you for staying calm. You helped save us all." Scooby wagged his tail, barking happily, while Shaggy joked, like, "I'm just glad we made it out with all our limbs." Daphne smiled, relief softening her features. This was more than a mystery. It was a test of trust, friendship, and respect for the world beneath the waves. Velma nodded, eyes reflecting the glittering aquarium lights. Science can do amazing things, but it must always be guided by ethics and care. As the sun rose over the restored zoo, the gang stood on the docks, watching the peaceful waters. Fred looked at his friends and said, "No monster is unbeatable when we work together." And with that, they headed off. Ready for the next adventure, knowing that some mysteries were as deep as the ocean itself, and just as vital to protect. The submerged zoo had faced its darkest tide, and emerged stronger. But beneath the surface, countless secrets still stirred, waiting to be uncovered by those brave enough to dive deep.